Hey, what is up everyone? Welcome back to another simple video right here on my channel. So today we're building a base game starter farm for two Sims in everyone's favorite world, of course, Windenburg. And as you can see here, I'm just starting to put the exterior walls and try to get a general shape that I liked. And this was a pretty fast process. As you can see here, it only took me a few minutes to complete. So I had a pretty clear concept at this point because I knew I wanted to go for brighter colors like this yellow wooden siding here, and also as a contrast I wanted to add some kind of stone or brick, which you can see here on the smaller building to the left. And of course the windows and doors should be white. I think it matches pretty well. So as already mentioned, this is a starter home, meaning it costs less than 20,000 simoleons, so two grown-ups can move in right away without working before or any cheating. So if you're looking for a starter home, this one would work. It's also base game only, so you don't need any additional packs for it. But if you have tiny living, this would qualify as a small house, so you would get the perks for living in a tiny home residential, which is also quite nice. So at this point I'm just doing some minor adjustments to the house. I wanted it to be a bit smaller than originally was. I think it was just a bit too big, and as you can see, I'm using a lot of pillars again, as I always do, mostly do, to frame the house a bit more, to give it some additional structure, which is actually a bit of a problem for building starter homes because pillars are very expensive in comparison to other things like windows, of course. So as you can see here, I added a lot of windows because I wanted to have a lot of natural light in there, and I actually removed a lot of them during the end of this build because they were just not necessary and also a bit too expensive. So especially with starter homes, you have to make decisions what's important for the house while keeping your budget, so the windows were not that necessary. I also wanted to add a patio because I think it really fits the country farmhouse lifestyle I was going for. And as you can see here, I initially wanted to go for a wooden deck, but eventually I decided to go with the same stone that I used in the front of the house. And here I'm just adding some details, some flowers. Of course, I wanted this to be very bright, very colorful. So at this point I was adding some additional details to the exterior, just scrolling through the debug section here, and I decided to add a chimney, of course, because it makes the house look good, or chimneys to be more specific, as you can see here, because I wanted the chimney to be a bit higher, so I added a smaller one on top of the bigger one. And I'm also putting just some objects that I wanted to use down with no specific place actually, because I wasn't sure where to put them at this point. There are actually a lot of really nice base game debug objects for building farms. For example, these cabbages here, I think they work really well, and there are also a lot of other objects that I really often use. For example, these stone slabs here, I think they are pretty amazing for building pathways, even though I usually use the rounded ones because there's a bit more variation to them. So base game debug also has these nice vine-like plants that I put on the wall right here, and also some very nice hedges. They look way better than the normal ones you get in base game. And what I also like are these wooden planks you can use for basically everything. I use them for framing a lot, as you can see here, just to give a little extra detail. So here I'm just adding some more trees and flowers to the build, starting the landscaping around the house before doing the interior. As you can see here, I'm just trying to figure out which flowers to use. There are actually quite a few options for base game flowers and also debug base game flowers, and plants you can use for decorating your houses inside and outside as well. So I'm also using some terrain paint here to add some additional detail to the path and also around the house, just to add some little extra details to make the house look a bit more realistic. So since this is a farmhouse, I was pretty sure that I wanted to add some type of fencing around the house, and I ended up using the same very basic brown fence that I actually use a lot. I really like this fence. It's great for all kinds of builds, and so I was also considering other options like this white fence here, but I think the brown one is basically the best for this type of build. And then I decided to add a bit more of these slabs and some nice foundation to the patio area. I also wanted to add a car, and I think a pickup truck is a pretty good choice for a farmhouse like this. Wasn't sure about the colors, so I added an orange one and a green one to decide later on which one fits the overall look a bit better. So here I'm using the same wooden planks as before to create some kind of frame around the cabbage patch here, and I think it looks quite nice to have some kind of frame around, because otherwise it would just be some smear of brown terrain paint, and therefore I think this was the best option here. So I actually did another starter home where I used the different debug objects for framing cabbage patch like this one here. I'm gonna link it in the description below and also in the info box if you're interested in watching that video as well. However, I think I like this one a bit more just because the wood is just a bit nicer, and what's always tricky for me is trying to figure out where the fence should be, because with debug objects we have a bit more options where to put it, since it's not snapping into place on the grid because it's not a real fence. However, they're only like 2 or 3 different lengths, so it's quite tricky to put them down and have them at the right place where you're actually planned on having the fence. So it's a bit of trial and error. So, and sometimes the objects have to actually intersect with each other to make it work, and I usually don't like to do that, because when you approach the object and there are several ones shoved into each other, it creates this kind of flickering effect which I don't like, and you can see that there are actually various objects intersecting, so I try to avoid that because I think it just doesn't look good. So moving on now to the interior, I was just putting down some wooden flooring here and add a staircase to reach the first floor. In my opinion, ladders are not really a good option, also not for tiny houses like this one, just because they feel kind of odd to me, because usually houses don't have ladders inside, and therefore I decided to add a staircase, even though it might be a bit constricting, but I think it works and looks fine. And I also tried to level the big window in the back with the counters, and at this point I also realized that there wasn't enough space for a real bathroom, so I added some additional tiles in the back just to create this 2x2 room, which is just sufficient for a proper bathroom consisting of a shower, a sink and a toilet. So there's everything your Sims need in there, and usually I don't build bigger bathrooms even for much larger houses, just because it's enough space. So when I started building this house, I didn't think it would be a problem to find an area for the dining table and the living room as well, but as it turned out it was quite difficult because there were so many windows, doors and also the staircase I had to consider, and especially the brick room to the left was very difficult to furnish, just because it has so many tall windows on every side and also a door, so there wasn't really much space to put a sofa or some chairs. As you can see here, I was trying to figure out which sofa would fit also the style of the house, because there are not that many great sofas here in base game, to be honest. Since this is a starter home, at this point there wasn't much money left, but I still wanted to add as many functional objects as possible. And when I tried furnishing the upstairs bedroom, it was kind of difficult because the staircase was just making the room even smaller, and there wasn't much space to the left and right of the bed. So even though I wanted the dining table in the kitchen area, eventually I had to move it to the living room area, just because I didn't fit anywhere in the kitchen. So at this point I wasn't too happy with the table in the living room, but I think in the end it turned out alright and everything is functional, so I'm quite happy about that. So to fill the huge empty space in the kitchen area, I decided to have some kind of breakfast area here, using some counters and bar stools that I added underneath and also next to the staircase. So with my remaining funds, I wanted to add some more additional decorations and also functional items, like maybe an easel or something like that. And then I moved on working in the exterior, because I had placed some objects, as you can see here, that I had placed before and that I wanted to use later on. So I added some more slabs to create another path right here. Before I used more of the wooden planks I used for the cabbages before to create another patch, and then I filled it in with some more terrain paint. So at this point I was already quite happy how the exterior looked like. Only did some minor adjustments to the objects here, changing some swatches around, and of course building the second patch, as I have already mentioned before. I also added some more terrain paint to the rest of the lot, but I cut it out because it was not very interesting here at this point. And then I moved on to work on the inside again, because I wasn't too happy about the bed. There are not too many good beds in base game, to be honest, and I wasn't too sure because it didn't fit the style that I was going for. Especially the wood tone was kind of odd, so I had to go for another bed that had a similar type of white to fit the windows and flooring. And this bed was actually really wide, so I wasn't sure if it would fit in there, and I had to put it in the corner, as you can see here, hoping that Sims would be able to scoop over, but I ended up putting it in the middle again, so just for functionality purposes. So then I started adding some lights, because the house was still very dark even though it had a lot of windows, and I decided to go for mostly the small dots, just because they're cheap and very subtle. I think they fit most builds, no matter what style, so I like using them a lot, especially when building on a budget like here. So at this point I really didn't have much money left, so I went for some cheaper objects to add some decorations to the house, even though I wanted some of the objects to be skill building objects. However, I couldn't afford a TV or a computer, just because they're very expensive, and I spent too much money on the exterior, even though I had that many debug objects in use. I also couldn't afford any wall art, so I had to remove the one picture I had in this house, just because it was too expensive. And I decided to add some flowers and these very nice aprons that came with a new update for base game. I like them a lot. They have a lot of cool swatches and that fit most kitchens. Also some pans, as you can see here, just for some additional detailing. I also wanted to add one of the larger mirrors, just because I couldn't afford a dresser, because base game has a few good dressers, but they're all quite expensive, so I thought yeah, I can't afford one, so we don't put one down here, because the cheaper ones just don't look right, in my opinion. So that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want to see more, please consider subscribing, and hopefully see you guys next time.